All right. Give me 1 second. My computer usually has a quick delay, so there we go. All right. That being said, I'll go ahead and start. So by default, Marcos, I will probably just call this meeting to order since we don't have a chair at this time. And then once we have a chair, which is an action item on our agenda, we can note that. So I will just call the meeting to order at 3:04 p.m. And then at this point, any of our selected members, if anyone wants to make a motion to, I guess I could do a roll call, sorry. So District 1 member, Chris Grazier.
Here.
All right, District 2 member, Gary Donato.
Present.
All right, perfect, thank you. And if I get anyone's name wrong, I apologize, just correct me. Nicholas Mckenzie for District 3.
Present.
Perfect, thank you, Nicholas. District 4, Lilly Mae Ortiz.
Present.
Thank you. And then Gail Rickers.
Present.
Perfect. And Burl Beckner. Oh, Burl, can you unmute and say, there you go. Oh.
Okay, sorry about that. And present, thank you.
Okay, perfect, no worries. In the virtual world, we do kind of make sure everyone's unmuted when they say something. And then Carmela Quintana. Actually don't see Carmela on. All right, so we will note that she is absent at this time. And then we do also have some of our at-large, I don't know if any of our alternates are on. Anyways, so we do have a quorum to move forward. And if anyone would like to make a motion to approve the agenda, which includes discussion and appointment of a chairperson and vice chairman, as well as a presentation. Although I don't see the presentation on this agenda, Geraldine. So maybe we need to amend the agenda.
Let me make a motion to amend the agenda to include presentation as, well, I lost the agenda, so I can't say what item number it is.
Under action items 5, probably B, after appointment of chair and vice chair, perhaps.
I was
Okay.
actually, or under item C, matters from the committee. We could do, or I guess it doesn't matter.
And I would second the motion. So we have a B and C. I only
Yes.
see
A and B. So we can add it as item B under, well, it's not really an action item, but it could be a discussion item. So we'll put it under 5B.
Okay, so moved.
Okay, awesome.
Second.
I would also raise the question whether, since we don't have minutes, whether 4 should be deleted just for the purpose of this agenda.
Traditionally on our agenda templates, if there are no items under, then we just move forward.
Okay,
So yes.
thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we have a motion and a second to amend the agenda to include a presentation. And let me just take a quick roll call. So Chris Grazier.
Aye.
All right, Gary Donato.
Present. Aye.
Yes.
Yep.
All
Aye.
right.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Nicholas Mckenzie.
Present. Aye.
All right, Lilly Mae Ortiz.
Yes.
All right, Gail.
Aye.
All right, Burl.
Yes,
All right, and then we have Carmela as absent. All right, motion is approved to amend the agenda. Moving on then to action items. The first item is the appointment of a chairperson to this committee. And a vice chairperson. So at this time, yes, Mr. Grazier.
I was gonna ask or suggest that maybe we could go around the room and quickly introduce each other so that we all know we all know, I mean, I Googled some of y'all and it's a really impressive panel, but it'd be nice if we all introduce each other and see if anyone's interested in serving as chair.
Yes, absolutely. You may have read my mind, Mr. Grazier. I was actually going to recommend that exact thing. If everyone would like to do a quick introduction and a brief overview of themselves, and then if anyone would like to say whether they are interested in serving in the capacity of chair or vice chair at that time. So kind of in my order of roll call, Chris, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name's Chris Grazier, a lawyer in Santa Fe. I do a lot of real estate work. And I do a lot of kind of local government adjacent work, land use, hearing officer, et cetera. Volunteered for this commission because I see it as important work. Ideally, it'll be somewhat less controversial than the redistrictings that make the news. But I think we have a good process in Santa Fe. The city code tracks pretty well my understanding of federal election law, and I do have some experience with elections cases. I mean, I have a fair amount of experience staffing and running committees, both government and nonprofit. I mean, I'd be willing to serve as chair, but if anyone is interested in serving as chair, I would certainly support them in doing that.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Grazier. Gary, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. Name's Gary Donato. I recently moved here in August of 2021 from just south of Boston. This is my actual retirement home now. As much as we can say that we retire. I have a PhD in political science, retired Navy, served 22 years in the military on a variety of different committees. I've been on presidential commissions and such. Every town that I've ever lived in, I've worked as an election worker or charter revision commissions, because I think that's part of my citizen responsibility, but also to get out of the ivory tower of political science and get into the practical world of politics. Since I'm not that familiar with the politics here of Santa Fe yet, I'm learning. I have no problem in serving as vice chair, but I don't think I'm really qualified here to serve as chair. But I would accept the vice chair position.
Christine, you're muted.
I know, I
There.
apologize. You think by now I should be an expert at when I'm muted and unmuted. But sorry about that. Nicholas, did you want to go next?
No problem. I'm Nicholas Mckenzie. I work as the Veteran Service Officer through DVS for Los Alamos County, Santa Fe County, Rio Arriba County, and a few other counties. My main purpose is to assist veterans and their family members in attaining state and federal benefits. I am also a 20+ year Navy veteran, but in 20 years, I've never stepped foot on a Navy vessel. Yeah, I was a Navy CD, so not a real, they call us dirt sailors instead of sailors. But I actually was looking for the veteran advisory boards based off of my job. And I saw this and I said, hey, you know what? Let me throw my name in the hat. If they like the resume, they'll pick me. It'll be a good opportunity to learn how commissions work and, how I can assist the community.
Thank you. Do you, would you like me to know if you have any interests?
No interest in running as chair or vice chair, but I definitely I'm Navy through and through. So fall in line and do what we need to do to accomplish the task.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nicholas.
Roger that.
Next up would be Lilly Mae Ortiz.
Thanks, Christine. I'm Lilly Mae Ortiz. I'm a native northern New Mexico gal, lived here all my life. Worked for the state of New Mexico, the Department of Finance and Administration for 27 years, and retired there as the division director of the Administrative Services Division, and worked many years as a budget analyst for the state, carrying legislation for the different governors, worked under 6 governors, have a lot of experience in policy analysis and budgeting. I've also served as a elected school board member in Milwaukee. I lived there for 40 years and just moved to Santa Fe 3 years ago. So I'm very well aware of the geographic configuration of the populace here. And I'm excited to see that Santa Fe is looking at pulling together something that represents its constituents. I've served as president of the State School Board Association. I served as president of the school board in Milwaukee, and I've also served as president of the National Hispanic Caucus, and we met in Virginia. So I've had a lot of opportunities to chair meetings, have no problem doing that, would be happy to throw my hat in the ring. My purpose is to add value and to represent the community so that we can pull together a really good representation in all the work that we do. So happy to be here and happy to see all of the friendly faces. Thanks, Christine.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Lilly Mae. Gail?
I'm Dr. Gail Rickers, and my degree is actually in psychology, which includes a lot of research. And so I teach research right now online. And we moved here in 2010, but then bought our house in Santa Fe and had to leave. And so we just moved back in 2020 and are very glad to be here. And it will be our permanent home in the future as well, at least with fingers crossed, that's how it will be. So I'm looking really forward to learning a lot more about how Santa Fe government works and how the Redistricting Commission works. It's always been something that happened somewhere else with someone else. So I'm really glad to be here and I'm glad to serve on the committee. I'm not interested in being the chair or the vice chair at this point. I don't think that's a realistic expectation. But I am looking forward to working with everyone. I think this will be really lovely.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gail. Burl?
Yes,
All right.
thank you. My wife and I moved to Santa Fe about 6 years ago. And I've tried to stay in any community I've lived in close to city government and community government, county government, whatever. So to have an understanding, I've not been a politician. I've not served in an elected office, but again, I've been close. My career has been, the second half of my career was principally in radio and television operations and ownership and news operations and so forth. So my background is journalism. And, I feel like I'm a pretty good communicator, a pretty good writer, and a pretty good researcher on topics of importance that I've dealt with. I was going to add that for the veterans and the veteran service folks here in the group, I did my time in the Army, short time. I was drafted, one of the last draftees before the draft ended. So anyway, I'd be perfectly willing to serve chair or vice chair. I don't have the experience that some of you may have, but be glad to serve and support anyone who is selected to chair the group. Thank you.
All right, perfect. And Carmela is not present. So of the voting members that are here, I don't know if anyone wants to make a motion.
I would like to introduce myself as an alternate.
Oh yes, I apologize. I am so sorry, George. I was focused on
the serious people are people who actually have a vote in this process.
No, just the vote. I sometimes turn into what's our vote? What's our anyway? Go ahead.
No problema. I'm George Duncan, and I'm an emeritus professor of statistics and public policy at Carnegie Mellon University. A PhD in statistics, and I've been quite interested in both the process and, of course, the the implications of the whole redistricting process. So I'm intrigued with how this will work out in Santa Fe. So I wish all this well.
Yes, same. And then with that, Laura, do you want to say a few words
Sure.
as well? Perfect.
Sure. I guess I'm an alternate. I'm Laura Hendry. I know nothing about the government except for what I read on the news. And this redistricting thing has been so upsetting to me. And I was so excited to hear about this group. Sounded wonderful. And I've got to tell you, I work as I teach families how to do dementia care for people who get dementia. And I'm going to have to get off at 4 for an appointment. I'm really sorry, but this is just the way it is. But so I'm an alternate that probably is going to be far out in the orbit of this planetary system. But I just want to say I support you. And if anything comes up where I can help, I would like to. But no chairman for me, none of that. I'm really pretty busy right now. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So I don't know if there is discussion or anyone, would like to make a motion of any sorts as we kind of navigate who will become the chairperson. Mr. Grazier, Ms. Ortiz, and Mr. Reckner have all expressed interest in that position.
I would just like to add a point of discussion. I've done a lot of homework on the 2015 commission that the city had, redistricting commission, the work that was done there. And I know research and polling, you were involved, Brian, your group at that time. And I know you have a great reputation for the work you do and your associates do in this field. It was interesting to see some of the people involved at that time and the work they did and the process that went through. And I've tried to study that to have a better understanding of where we are, what has come before us, and where we need to go, and what the timing and locations of some of the work that was done. Thank you.
Mr. Grazier.
Yeah, I would like to move that we elect Lilly Mae Ortiz as chair and Rob Reckner as vice chair. And Gary, I'm sorry, we just had to pick someone.
Yeah, no worries, not at all.
Okay, so we have a motion for Mr. Grazier on that. Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second that motion.
All right, Gary with a second. All right, and then I will do a quick roll call. So Mr. Grazier,
Aye.
Gary Donato.
Aye.
All right, Nicholas.
Aye.
Right, Lilly Mae.
Aye.
Gail.
Aye.
Earl.
Aye.
All right, perfect. And then of course we are absent for Carmela. So motion has been approved to appoint a chairperson and vice chairperson to the redistricting commission, which takes us to the next item on the agenda. We added in the presentation from our consultant, which is research and polling. And Brian, I believe you have a presentation, correct?
Correct.
All right, perfect. You have screen share ability, so go
Yes, and
ahead.
Michael Sharp will screen share. Will
Okay, perfect. Michael, you're all set.
Okay. Well, first, it's a great pleasure for us at Research and Polling to once again assist the city of Santa Fe in providing redistricting services. Just to give you a little sense of our experience on the first slide, basically we've been doing this for quite a while, over the decades, more than 30 years, with direct experience with New Mexico and Santa Fe. In fact, for the city of Santa Fe, we started assisting the city council back then before the independent commission was established, working directly with the city council in 1991, 2001, and 2011. And also, as it turned out, that Santa Fe redistricted twice last decade, and we'll talk about that a little. Lots of experience with the public schools. Besides myself, Michael Sharp, Vice President, who's on the Zoom call here, and Brittany Poss, the Director of Data and Analytics. They're smarter than me, and they'll be very much involved in the process as well as we move forward in getting the job done for you. So what I'd like to do is make a presentation and talk about various aspects that are going to be very important for you to know and understand for the purposes of redistricting. It sounds like some of you have done your homework already and have become knowledgeable on the topic. But if we move to the first slide first, and you may be aware of all this already because this is in the ordinance. The ordinance lays out a process for you to follow. And that process summarized here is one, to have an organizational meeting, which you're doing right now. We've added to the agenda the general overview and population statistics. We wanted you to get a feel for what's happened to the population shifts in Santa Fe and how that will impact redistricting. So we're going to do that now. The ordinance also says that the very next meeting is to provide education and directives to research and polling. Now, and we could also repeat in the ABCs, the redistricting principles. Now, typically in a second meeting, research and polling would also unveil various concepts for your consideration so that you can react to them. Also, it would be an opportunity for the public to react. What do you like? What do you not like? What recommendations do you have or suggestions to us to tweak the plans, those initial plans? So if you want us, we could, if we have enough time, I don't know if you've pre-scheduled meetings, but if we had at least 2 more weeks, we could come in with some concepts for your consideration to react to, or we can pass that up to the meeting after. The ordinance calls for public meetings, show plans, get public input, get commission input. Then based on public input and commission input, revise those plans, show them again, go through that process until you have a plan that you like, that you support. Now, oftentimes groups are contentious in this. The experience we had working with the Santa Fe Independent Commission in 2015 was fabulous. They worked so well together. They came up with a consensus. They came up with a plan unanimously. And it just showed you the difference between when politicians are involved as compared to when a group of independent citizens are involved. It was very impressive, collaborative process that the commission worked on. And then ultimately you would adopt a final plan. Hopefully the plans that are unveiled by us, the plans that are tweaked by you, would also be posted on the city website. And hopefully we can work with the GIS folks with the city and get those posted so people in the general public can also look at those plans and comment. The ordinance also requires that you make those plans accessible to the public in one form or another. So that's the process. Many of you know what redistricting is, but let's talk about it on the next slide. You know, redistricting, generally speaking, is the adjustment of election district boundaries to account for population shifts. You know, sometimes in a city or a county, the population growth is equally distributed throughout the city or the county. And therefore, oftentimes it's not even necessary to make minor adjustments to the boundaries because of that. But more times than not, what we find that there's unequal growth within a city or a county, and that requires boundaries to shift to account for equal population, to get them up to equal population among the districts. Another way of looking at redistricting is to basically say it's the way in which we change our districts to determine who represents us. People want to be represented by someone that perhaps will go to the council and represent their best interests. So putting together districts where people share something in common is typically an approach that these groups such as yourselves use. When is it done? Well, generally speaking, all groups, whether it be Congress or the legislature, cities, counties, school boards, they're required to redistrict after each decennial census. Why after each decennial census? Well, that's when the data are freshest. That's when we have the most current data from the US Census Bureau. Now, the Santa Fe City Charter allows for redistricting more than once a decade. In many statutes, it says once a decade, the legislature shall or a county shall, but the charter is different. It says that it allows for redistricting more than once per decade. So it's important for you to realize, some of you do, that Santa Fe actually did redistrict and employed this Independent Citizens Commission process in 2015. Why did they do it mid-decade? Because in 2014, the city of Santa Fe had a major annexation. And the city of Santa Fe added 13,200 people to the city limits. Sort of South Santa Fe, both sides of Airport Road and the like. And so the city council in their wisdom thought, why don't we redistrict mid-decade and get these new annexed people in to the city council districts so that the district populations are not lopsided, because so much of the annexation occurred in the southwestern part of town. So it's important for you to know, it's not as if it's been 10 years since redistricting. It really was done actually in 2015 as well. Okay, who districts? Well, for the 3 congressional seats in New Mexico, the legislature and the governor. For the legislative seats, you may have heard of all the contentious stuff that just happened in Santa Fe. The legislature redistricts itself. County commissioners redistrict themselves. City councilors the same, and local school board members redistrict their own districts. What's unique here, and the reason why we're showing this slide, is that this committee, this commission, is empowered to adopt a districting plan without the approval of the city council. And this is unique. We haven't worked with anyone else where you actually have the authority to get the job done. Now, there are many groups like the city of Albuquerque. We're working with their advisory committee. The legislature set up a citizen redistricting commission. They recommended to the legislature plans, and then the legislature could accept, reject, amend them. But in your case, you have the authority to get the job done. Okay, who gets counted? Well, for purposes of redistricting, everyone gets counted. Everyone who's counted in that census, adults, kids, citizens, college students in dorms, prisoners, non-citizens, undocumented immigrants, foreign students. As you know, in the census, everyone gets counted. And where do they get counted? They get counted at the place where they live and sleep most of the time. And so for the purposes of redistricting, when we're talking about equalizing the population among the different districts, we're talking about we count everybody. Kids count because kids need to be represented too, and so on and so forth. Now, you've heard in the news that many people at the national and state level have been concerned about a census undercount. And in fact, the Census Bureau has acknowledged that Hispanics and Native Americans on reservations and African Americans have been undercounted. We are stuck with the census though. The Census Bureau might adjust numbers down the road. They rarely do, but if they do, it would affect allocation of resources for federal government grants. It would not affect districting. So we're stuck with the census as we go. Here are the 5 principles of districting. Here are the things that you need to always be given a lot of thought to. And we'll make this presentation, of course, it'll be online. We'll also send it to you an email. Equal population, minority voting rights, contiguity, compactness, and communities of interest. These are the 5 things that we think of. Now, when it comes to the first 2, they're the ones that are most important when it comes to the federal law. Federal law is pretty clear cut on those being the most important. And there are different standards for what is considered equal population, and we'll talk about it. Minority voting rights, that deals with the Voting Rights Act, we'll talk about it. Contiguity, precincts must be contiguous within a district. You can't have 2 islands. Compactness, That's the shape of the district. The district shouldn't look like snakes or pencils. They should look like squares or circles or something more tight to the center. And then communities of interest. Communities of interest, what the public really focus on, keeping my neighborhood intact, what are shared values and interests within my area. Okay. There is that constitutional mandate to create districts utilizing equal population. These are the landmark cases in the 1960s that established the one person, one vote, the fact that equal population equals representation. If you think about it, if a district is overpopulated and it has too many people in it, many more people than the other, then the people in that district are being underrepresented. So we want to equalize population so that we have equal population. Okay, but what does that mean? What is the ideal population of a district? Well, we've got PhD statisticians and professors on this board, so they will not have to rack their brains too hard, because to calculate the ideal population is the simplest type of math imaginable. You simply take the population of, in this case, the city, and you divide it by the number of districts that you have, which is 4. Okay, so the ideal population of a district, ideally, is, so we have the 87,000 population divided by 4. Now in Santa Fe, as you know, you have 8 city councilors, but you have 4 dual member districts, and those 2 members within a district run in staggered terms, but it's still 4 districts. And so the ideal population of a district would be the 81,876. However, you are allowed some leeway. And the leeway comes from federal case law and from state statute, that you have some leeway above and beyond the ideal population. What is that leeway? Well, the federal case law tells us that if you take the smallest district and the largest district, that the total deviation in population should not be more than 10%. So if you have one district that's 4% higher than the ideal and another district that's 4% lower than the ideal, your total deviation is 8%, and you're way within the norms according to federal case law. But the state statutes have been more specific for local governments, in that they require that the deviation shall be between the largest and the smallest district, no more than plus or minus 5% from the ideal population. So the ideal population, as we talked about, is the 21,800, which is the population of the city divided by 4. And then the plus or minus 5% tells us that the range that you have to work with when adjusting boundaries is that 20,700 to the 22,900. That's our range to stick within state and federal law. Minority voting rights, that second principle. Do not dilute the voting strength of ethnic or language minority groups. Comes out of the Voting Rights Act. The word minority is a census term, is a Voting Rights Act term. People of color is a more commonly used phrase. We'll use both. But protected groups under the Voting Rights Act: Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians. What it's really all about is giving the minority population an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. It doesn't mean a Hispanic must be elected from a Hispanic district. It means that Hispanics must have an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice, or a predominant Anglo district would have an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice, regardless of their race or ethnicity. And there's too much case law involved in understanding that we can guide you through if this becomes an issue. Frankly, it's less of an issue in Santa Fe to the extent that there are places like Hobbs, New Mexico, and Clovis and Roswell, where there's been documentation that oftentimes Anglo bloc voting prevents Hispanics from electing candidates of their choice. There's less polarization in Santa Fe, but we can guide you through this process. At the same time, it's important not to dilute the voting strength of minority groups. Next slide. You also can't racially gerrymander. You cannot create districts in which race is the predominant criterion in subordination of traditional districting principles. So here you see a beautiful district from 1991 in North Carolina, beautiful being sarcastic, in which under this district, the African Americans in this case were concentrated along an interstate, taking different African American communities that had nothing in common with each other to pack them into one district. And so it's using race as the predominant criteria in subordination of traditional districting principles. So this would be unconstitutional. You don't want to pack a group too much so that they can't have more representation. You don't want to crack a group too much so they can't get any representation. And we'll talk about those things along the way. Okay, compactness was one of the principles. We've got statisticians on this committee, and we can go through. We went through the math yesterday in our Albuquerque meeting and saw people's heads spin. The bottom line is there are different ways to measure compactness. None are perfect. You know it when you see it. We will show compactness measures if necessary, but look at the district on the left. That's the Northern District, the Congressional District in Albuquerque in 1991. You know, it's relatively compact. It's a vast district that covers the northern half of the state, but that's only because population density was such that it took that size of a district to get to 1/3 of the population of the state for our 3 congressional districts. The district in Texas there, you can see, is not compact. It gets down to block level and point level contiguity. Next principle, contiguity. Okay, precincts are the building blocks. You want the precincts to touch in some point in space. You want the districts to touch in some point in space. So districts A, B, and C are contiguous on the left. District A is not contiguous on the right-hand side because District A has 2 separate islands in which there's no point in space where they touch. You have to be able to walk your district without leaving it. You can't walk A or drive a car you leave it, and so it's not contiguous, that District A. Communities of interest. Communities of interest are usually what the public focuses on. You know, there are other factors that may be considered when drawing districts. The trick to communities of interest is different people have different viewpoints on what those communities of interest are. So oftentimes you'll hear, oh, my neighborhood should be with this district, or my neighborhood should be with that district, when people might honestly, sincere, honest minds may disagree. But typically communities of interest would include a group or area with shared characteristics. People might speak to you about keep my neighborhood together. Cultural, language, historical traditions, geographic boundaries, lived experiences. Might all want people to stay in the same district so they can elect somebody who looks like them, so they can elect somebody who shares their values. Maintaining the core of existing districts oftentimes can be considered a community of interest. Respecting political subdivisions, avoiding precinct splits, we'll talk about that in a moment, and even taking into account incumbents, the residential locations. If you want to keep the incumbents unpaired, fine. If you could come up with a more beautiful plan that unfortunately pairs incumbents, you could consider it. That's the kind of debate that you'll have. Now, within the city charter, they actually prioritized these principles and they put them in a rank order, which you see here. So the charter says, number 1 on your mind should be equal population. 2, minority voting rights. Again, federal case law tells us those top 2 are really important. Communities of interest, they're saying 3, compactness and contiguity 4. And then within the charter, it says compensate for undercounted minorities. Well, we don't have a report from the Census Bureau that tells us where the specific undercounts are and what streets in Santa Fe. We do know some general information nationally. The case law is clear. You're forced to use the census results for better or worse. We could talk more about this issue and some ways where you could compensate for this. We want to talk about that in our very first meeting. But I do want to mention one other thing on that slide, and that is oftentimes there are tensions between these principles. Let's say you really want to keep a neighborhood intact, but to do so really moves you away from the ideal population or makes the compactness not look as good. Maybe you're moving off of a major street like Cerrillos and going crossing over just to keep a neighborhood intact. So there's tensions between these There's no such thing as the perfect plan. And it's up to you to decide, and you have some prioritization here of what takes precedence. Within the ordinance, it also lays out the city ordinance that you may assign appropriate weight to minimizing precinct splits. Again, precincts are the building blocks for running elections. They're also the building blocks for redistricting. Now, over the last 10 years, the Santa Fe County has added a lot more precincts. We have a lot more building blocks than 5 or 10 years ago, so that probably won't become a big issue. And then minimizing voter confusion in switching elected officials into different districts. You can take that into account according to the city ordinance. So at this time, we're going to show you some population data. Okay, so if we look at Santa Fe, the city of Santa Fe's population in 2010, it was 67,748. And if we look at the population in the 2020 data, 87,505, change of 19,000. Percent change, 29%. Now, we've even seen newspaper articles saying that Santa Fe is the largest city growth among the major cities. And it is. However, it's really important to recognize it's not all due to dynamic, natural, and migration growth. In the middle, in 2014, in between the two censuses, Santa Fe had that annexation and added 13,200 people. So part of the growth between the decades was the annexation. Then there's also some natural growth, there's some migration growth. But it's important to recognize. And one thing that's really critical is that those people, the 13,200 people that were annexed into the city, they were accounted for in the 2015 census redistricting. So we've already added in, when you look at the current districts, that's why they redistricted in 2015, to get those people in. So the shifts may not be as dramatic as you think because of the mid-decade districting. But just to show you what the population stats look like, if we look at 2015 using 2010 census data, after the annexation, population was 81,000, 2020 census 87,000. So the change since that annexation, 6,400, and those are people who haven't been accounted for. And that percent change between 2015 and 2020 was that 7.9%. So this represents the population change according to the 20 census that occurred after the 2015 redistricting of the districts. Okay, thank goodness we have a lot of smart people on this committee who I know can absorb that information. That's fantastic. Here's the racial data for Santa Fe 2020 census. Now, we talked about total population. We talked about that's what you have to use to adjust the boundaries to equalize them. But when it comes to Voting Rights Act issues, when it comes to looking like, for example, do we have a majority Hispanic district where we want it to be? There you look at the adult percent Hispanic, adult percent African-American, adult percent Asian, Native American, et cetera. Because under the Voting Rights Act, when it comes to allowing voters an opportunity to elect a candidate choice, they look at voting age. It's called VAP, voting age population. So here we're looking at adult population. If we looked at total population, typically the percent Hispanic would rise by 2 or 3 points because Hispanics tend to have more children. Whites tend to be older and have fewer kids in Santa Fe. So here are the numbers. In fact, the percent Hispanic has gone down in Santa Fe over the decade if you account for the annexation as well in the 2010 census numbers. Using the 2010 census numbers and accounting for the annexation, there were 49.3% Hispanics, but the 2020 census, accounting for the annexation and everything, is 46.5%. So the percent Hispanics actually gone down. Okay, here we are, the current Santa Fe City Council districts. The labels show you the district number, and they show you the percentage deviation from the ideal population of a district. So remember, we talked about the ideal population of a district. This is the percent deviation from the ideal. So look at what District 1 actually falls within the plus or minus 5%. District 2 is just outside the plus or minus 5. District 3 is just a tiny bit outside the plus or minus 5. And the growth in Santa Fe since the last districting has been in District 4, Southern Santa Fe. It's up 12.69%. So in Albuquerque 10 years ago, one of the districts was 49% too large on the west side, and they had earth-shakingly dramatic things to do. This time theirs was not as dramatic as well. These districts that we're looking at that are the current districts were the ones that were adopted by the committee in 2015. They did do it by consensus and a unanimous vote. The districts, as you can tell, are in District 1. You know, basically, if you look at the border between District 1 and District 2, it's mostly Cerrillos Road, and then East Alameda and Canyon Road are bordering District 1 and District 2. So District 1 is sort of a plaza downtown, east side, going down West Alameda and Cerrillos down to Siler Road kind of district. It's compact, and it's taking the northern parts north of Alameda and Canyon Road. And then District 2, if you look at the boundaries between District 2 and District 4, pretty much you're looking at Yucca and Llano. There are the borders there between District 2 and 4. It's District 2, you know, has St. Michael's Drive running through the heart of it. And again, everything south of Cerrillos and Alameda is in District 2, right down to I-25. District 4 is the Southern Santa Fe district, also bordered by I-25. Now, District 4, 10 years ago, didn't have enough population, so it did cross over Cerrillos Road to pick up population. Now that District 4 is too large, we can see it backing down a little when it crosses Cerrillos Road as one of your concepts, and making District 4 a little more compact, shrink the boundaries because it's too large. District 3, you know, is a Terra Contenta, neighborhoods north and south of Airport Road district, a very compact district. And so typically what we do is we design concepts that take the current plan and make some minimal changes in different ways for your consideration. And then typically we also come up with other concepts that might be different approaches to engage debate of the commission and the public, and say, well, you know, it's time for a complete new change, or no, these districts are working, let's make minimal changes. And then you would have that healthy discussion. We would then also look at the race data and explain to you other aspects worthy of your consideration. So that's pretty much it. We don't need to get into in this meeting the racial stuff, although the tables that follow this in the slideshow, you'll be able to look at for homework, and that we'll be able to discuss in the next meeting. I can't resist while we're here though, Michael. On District 3, 18 plus adult, currently there are 2 Hispanic majority districts. District 3, the Tierra Contenta area, 74% Hispanic. And then District 4, among adults, 53.8% Hispanic. There are racial divides in Santa Fe. A lot of it does fall on the St. Francis Drive, where there are more higher percent Hispanic districts to the west of St. Francis, and then more Anglo districts, different socioeconomic status, and African-American community more distributed. And so we saw earlier the African-American population within the whole city is among adults is 0.9%. And if you look at it by district, it's distributed pretty equally among the districts as well. Same with the Asian population. But so really, and there's 1 or 2 other tables, but that you can look at. That concludes our presentation. We've got over the principles. We've shown you the population shifts since the last redistricting, where the ideal populations look like. And the next step would be either having another meeting where you give us guidance, or at that meeting, we show some concepts to get your reaction, and then for you to give us our orders to go from there.
Okay, so Christine, are you needing to move forward? You want me to jump in?
I'm happy to move forward in this meeting. I mean, at this point, the really item would be matters from the committees. So if you wanted to discuss how you would like to take, as Brian mentioned, the next meeting, and then of course, matters from the chair and scheduling a next meeting. So it's really up to you.
Well, let me just make a couple of comments and then we'll let the whole committee share their viewpoints. So I guess I want to thank Chris, first of all, for nominating me. I'm not quite sure if I should be thanking him yet, but we'll see. But thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And I just want to say, I'm very happy to be here, and I think we will work collaboratively as a group. We all have equal voices and we all have great viewpoints. And I think working together collaboratively, we can come up with good information. And having Brian lead us in terms of the data, I'm confident that we will get to a good place where hopefully we can be unanimous in our presentation. And having said that, I just have a couple of housekeeping questions, Christine, in terms of, you guys are keeping minutes. Does somebody need to do that? Are you doing that? I looked at the statutes and it talked about a budget. Do we need to know anything about a budget? And then also another question I have in terms of compliance, in terms of open meetings, do we have someone making sure we're all taking care of that? Those are my questions. And then I want to open it up to members to maybe perhaps provide comments about what Brian shared and the direction that we're looking at, and some questions they may have for Brian. So
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy, Chair Ortiz, to step in on that. We do take minutes. I'm noting all of the votes and motions. So we will have summary minutes for this commission to approve at the next meeting. We also, as I noted, have this meeting live on YouTube. So the meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and the recording will stay on the city YouTube channel for reference, I think, which is also very helpful as well. And then I think you asked about Open Meetings Act. We do notice this meeting in compliance with that. It is posted on our website, accessible, agenda, all, and again, the summary minutes that you will approve fall in line with that, but we do follow the 72-hour agenda notification, and this meeting was included on the weekly meeting list for the city clerk's office as well. I think as far as budget, the budget allocation is to hire the consultant in this case. So we do have that secured, and that was done in advance of, or I guess I wouldn't say in advance, but almost simultaneously to the, I just lost my train of thought, to when we were soliciting members, excuse me, for the commission. So we ran both of those kind of simultaneously, but that was the funding allocated for that. And then the clerk's office, clerk/community engagement office will support as necessary for outreach. Our office does the website, as Brian mentioned, to make sure presentations are posted on the website. We also handle the social media for the city of Santa Fe, all press and media communications. So my office is available basically to assist with any of the outreach, coordination, meetings, etc.
Good. Thank you for those responses. I appreciate that. And then the other question for you before we open it up to the floor to let everyone speak. In terms of future meetings, does the city already have a schedule for future meetings for all the 4 hearings, or is that something that we as a group will determine? And so, okay, you're not shaking your head that yes, we'll determine that. So as members speak, perhaps in addition to providing comments about Mr. Sandoff's presentation, maybe you can voice your opinion in terms of future meetings and the timelines for that. And I guess I'm also curious, Christine, what kind of time frame do we have to do all of this? Is it a 6-month period? It is a 2-month? What are we looking at? And that will be helpful for us to give you some feedback in terms of when we want to hold our meetings.
Yes, so we are, Brian or Geraldine, please feel free to hop in, but we are scheduled to do a presentation to the governing body, the first meeting in July. And that is only to present what the commission has as a recommendation. So we are, Brian, is that what you still have? That was in my notes.
I don't recall one way or the other, and so, but that rings true.
Yes, my
that would-
understanding, and I'll double check, is July 13th. There would be a presentation.
Oh, July 13. Okay, so the middle of the month, that should give time.
Yes.
Okay.
So that puts us on about a 3-month timeline for this process. We don't have the commission meetings scheduled out. That's really up to the commission, the frequency that you'd like to meet and work through. And then and then the community meetings are also not scheduled in advance. We really rely on the commission to decide the kind of status, and what it's based off presentation too. Burl, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah,
Or I don't know. Your hand's up, so I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
comment on that topic.
I was going to ask Brian, or raise the question about, let's see, where did I go? Yeah, about the timing. The ordinance seems to read that this process has to be completed 3 months before the election. And the election is November 8th, I believe. What is the next election date?
Of the following year.
Oh, it is?
Mhm.
Not
So
this year.
Not this year.
Okay.
So we just had an election in 2021 that started terms in 2022, and then we'll have another election in 2023.
Oh, okay.
So we have to be done by November of 2023.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification.
Of course.
Yeah, the state statute requires that local governments that hold their elections pursuant to the Local Election Act shall complete their process in the year after the census data are released. So from the state viewpoint, it has to be done this year. From the city viewpoint, if they want to set a voluntary date of, let's say, mid-July, then that would be a goal that could be set. But from the state viewpoint, it has to be done this year. Mid-July would be a aggressive but responsible goal to meet.
And Brian, this is Michael. Just to clarify that the charter itself, I can just read it verbatim. It just says that a districting plan shall be established within 1 year of receipt by the city of the final federal decennial census information. And so that census information was released on August 12th. And so just by reading that, it seems like that's a clear deadline. So if you get the city council, the commission's report by July 13th, you easily meet that deadline.
Great.
So we basically have not quite 12 weeks. That's to hold all 4 hearings and make a decision on what we're sending to the mid-July meeting. Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
Correct.
You're shaking your head, Christine. Yes. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Comments from the committee? Others with questions, comments?
I had one more question, and maybe Brian can explain it. You referenced public meetings. The ordinance references public hearings. Are they one and the same for our purposes?
To my knowledge, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
The ordinance speaks to abiding by the Open Meetings Act. So you'd have to, have your agendas posted 3 days before the meeting and things like that.
I mean, that's a great question, Burl, because I think because of the Open Meetings Act, we probably should look at developing a draft calendar really quick in terms of the hearings. Is that correct? So that we can make sure that they're publicized and fall within that timeline. And I'm sure, Brian, you have a better idea of how much time ahead of our hearings we need to work as a committee to get all of the options and some of the suggestions that you're presenting to us so that we can understand them. And is that, so this schedule, this calendar, do we do this in this committee, or is that something that we do offline?
That would be up to you. In 2015, they didn't pre-schedule meetings, and sometimes they met every 2 weeks. If they felt they had an emergency, they would meet sooner. But pre-scheduling does allow everybody to plan in advance, both for your own work schedules and for others. As an example, having at least 2 weeks between meetings we need a chance to be able to draw new plans based on your feedback and get those plans posted up online. So I think having meetings every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, 3 weeks may not cut it given your deadline. or most of them every 2 weeks, and some every 3. Michael, what do you think?
I think that's fine. I think especially for the first meeting in which we show plans, we'd like at least 2 weeks
Okay.
to be able to prepare the plans and the documents to show to the commission. And the other thing on the meetings I think that has come up is the Open Meetings Act with respect to the rolling quorum. So we just want to make sure that as the commission is deliberating, that those deliberations happen during the course of the open meeting and not necessarily in email chains. And so that's just something to, I think, be cognizant of as we communicate.
Really good point, and thank you for that guidance in terms of perhaps scheduling meetings every 2 weeks. And then the comment on the open meetings in terms of the requirements. Christine, I don't know if information was sent to everyone regarding open meetings. It's more familiar to some than to others and can get kind of convoluted if and we can get ourselves into trouble if we don't understand that. So I want to make sure that the members on the committee have enough information regarding open meetings and what in terms of what to do and what not to do. So make sure that we're following the law. And then the other question I have is regarding, are we going to do our meetings in Zoom all the time, or are we going to get to a point where it's going to be face-to-face?
So a lot of these questions I think are open for this commission to discuss. What day of the week works for this commission, what time works for this commission, whether you prefer to meet in Zoom or in person. The city right now is looking at transitioning some meetings to in person in May 11th. So that's more specific to the governing body and the 3 council committees, but just for your own awareness, that those really are some of the questions that we're looking to the commission for. We're happy to support those. If meetings are more convenient for this body in the morning on a Tuesday, we will look to accommodate that. But really, those are some of the questions, including the frequency. We also can send information about the Open Meetings Act. As you all know, I think in my communication, I either email individually or will blind copy everybody so that we don't inadvertently create a rolling quorum. Thank you, Michael, for bringing that up. And I was actually going to make the recommendation that some of those discussions happen as a group in this meeting so that we avoid those types of quorum issues, because you are limited to the number of individuals that can discuss something. And if you were to meet in one group and discuss something, and then Lilly Mae, you were to go report to another group, that is considered a rolling quorum, and that's not allowable. So the preference is really that discussion takes place as a group. And then, sorry, Brian, just one more quick question. Sorry. Or one more quick note is the July 13th date was based off of the agreement that the city clerk's office entered into with research and polling for this work. So it's not to say that the date can't be changed. That's just where that date came from. It was based off of our initial agreement with the contractor for the consultant for work done. So if the desire was to extend by 2 weeks, or we could definitely look at accommodating that.
Yeah, 10 year in 2015, the commission settled on keeping them all on Thursdays and keeping them all at 3. Had to have the same time for consistency. That was what was done then. And again, most of the meetings were every 2 weeks. That July 13th date, if it has to move 2 weeks, I guess we can wait and see if you have your work done. And then similarly, if everything's going great, you can always cancel one of the meetings and go 4 weeks in between. So I think there's some flexibility there. The city of Albuquerque does that. They've set meetings on certain dates, but on some of them, they wrote down if necessary. And that way they could give advance notice and say certain meetings may or may not occur just based on the speed in which the smoothness things are going.
Great comments, Brian. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Christine. I think you've really given us some good guidance there. So the commission, it sounds like we're being given information that suggesting meeting every 2 weeks to get started, to see how we're moving forward. And then if we continue wanting to meet like today, Thursday at 3, I think it does make sense for planning, at least my schedule, if I know when the next meetings are set up. So that's the recommendation from Brian and Christine. Every 2 weeks, Thursday, 3 o'clock, comments. What do you all say?
I'm fine with that, and I works for me, and I think if it works for everybody else, it'd be great. And may I add one more question along the way? That's why I raised my hand. The 4 public meetings or public hearings that the public weighs in, where the various plans are presented, those can't be 2 weeks apart, I don't think, because those, I would presume, we're presenting the same plans, sets of plans to the public at the previous commission did them in 3 or 4 different locations around town when they were having public meetings in person. So those, maybe we want to compress those 4 meetings into a tight time frame, a week or 2. Those would be treated separately, I would think, than our meetings where we're spending time discussing and hearing and making changes or suggesting changes.
Great question.
And if I may ask Michael Sharp a question to remind me, did the individual commission members take it to their own district and have their own meetings? And then we only went to the central meetings of the 4, or I don't recall traveling to different locations.
I recall traveling to, I believe it was the library down in Tierra Contenta, I believe.
Okay.
So I know that's the one I remember. There could have been others. It has been a number of years, but we did go around, and I don't know if we attended each one of the we'll call them regional meetings, for lack of a better term.
Right.
But we showed all the plans. We took comments at every single meeting. At future meetings, we brought revisions to the plans. And so with respect to the process, I think Brian touched on it, just to clarify, we'll show the plans during a public meeting, a public hearing / meeting. And at that meeting, the public have an opportunity, the board, your commission members will have an opportunity to suggest comments and maybe suggestions or changes to the plans, and we'll bring revisions to the next meeting, wherever that meeting happens to be. And that process just continues until you adopt a plan.
So that's why we wanted a little time between the meetings so that we'd have a chance to adjust it for the next meeting. Michael?
Right.
Yeah. And if you ended up doing them all on Zoom, one of the joys of Zoom is you can focus on District 4, but people from all over the city, if they had comments, they could also speak to them as well. You wouldn't have to restrict it to that one district. I guess you could do that whether the meetings were in the field or on Zoom. But
Marco, so you have your hand up. So anytime our attorney raises their hand, I usually go to them directly. And then I have a few comments around the public process and meetings as well. So Marcos, I'll let you.
Thank you. So I'm just looking at the code on this Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, and it appears to contemplate 7 different meetings at least. And so less this meeting, there would be 6 more. The first one is to name the chairperson and vice chairperson. The second one, it asks for 1 public hearing or public meeting to provide instruction to the consultant for the development of a preliminary districting plan or plans. So I think this is where this commission would give kind of direction to research and polling, and then those 4 hearings would happen. And then finally, a minimum of 1 public meeting to vote on a final districting plan after you've gotten the public input. So that's 6 more meetings. I think we could work backwards from when we anticipate this commission's work to be done, and sort of sketched out that way might be one way to do it. But I just want to give you that information based off of the direction in the code. So 1 more for direction to the consultant, 1 meeting for direction to the consultant, 4 meetings. I think ideally, as Mr. Bruckner has indicated, that was to be held in the different districts, but with Zoom, that might not be as important, or maybe it still is important. That would be up for you to decide. And then a meeting, at least 1 meeting separate from the 4, to vote on the final districting plan.
And Mr. Martinez, if I may ask you a question. So in our general experience in that second meeting where we're getting direction, we also show some initial concepts to sort of speed it up, as well as we find that people like to react to things. And it's easier for them to tell us what they like and they don't like than it is for them to come up with their own plans. Would that be inconsistent with the statute if in that second meeting, the commission provides us education and directives to us and also is reacting to concepts?
No, not at all. I don't think that that would be inconsistent at all. I think that this dialogue is important for you, to provide the information so that the commission can ask the right questions and then give you back feedback. But that's just how I sort of read the ordinance.
That's really good information. Christine, your hand is up. Did you have something to add to that?
Marcos actually touched on it a little bit, but I will note that I think 2 points. One, in the communication we sent out, I did send a link to the code specific to the Redistricting Commission. If you have not had a chance to read through that, I absolutely encourage each member to do so. We reference it often. But one note that I was going to say is the last time the Redistricting Commission met, we didn't have the technology in place that we do now. So it is true that if the meetings were to be held on Zoom or in a place in which we could have the recordings, they will stay on YouTube. And if the decision was made to go out into the public to any specific meetings, the code doesn't distinguish districts or areas. So I think we have some flexibility with technology. And again, these are just suggestions, but also the hearings are public facing. Of course, the meetings by default, because of the Open Meetings Act and technology, are also open to the public as well. We don't have public comment on this agenda, but just if someone could be watching this meeting live right now and be participating in, again, the presentations and so forth, we can keep posted on the website. And also if there's any additional technology that you'd like to explore for feedback, I'm thinking of surveys or social media engagement, we're happy to help with that as well. So I guess my long-winded point is that technology is now our friend, and our office is absolutely willing to support any additional feedback or engagement that this commission would like. So.
Thank you, Christine. I think that's a good pitch for continuing on Zoom, because we might reach more people and have a lot more information to present to them in the convenience of their home. So if the commission agrees to that, we should consider continuing on Zoom as we move forward. Christine. Yeah.
Sorry, just one quick note is the only thing I might recommend is that for any of the public hearings, so the meetings really geared toward the public, we might look at having those in the evenings, just because this time I think works really well for the commission to discuss business. But my recommendation would be for a community meeting to possibly utilize an evening time slot, just so that more people can attend and participate.
Okay.
The 2015 4 public meetings were at 5:30 in the afternoon, from what I read in the newspaper.
That's a good point. I think it's always good to have public meetings in the evening to allow all those that are working or anyone that wants an opportunity to join us so that they can. But good point, Burl. I want a clarification maybe from our attorney, Mr. Martinez. Am I to understand that this commission has the next meeting to understand and react to Mr. Sandaroff's presentation, and then we have a hearing right after that, and then start building and detracting or adding to the proposal at the hearings? Is it just the one meeting that this commission has to understand and react? Or?
No, it is. Let me just read it to you. The commission shall conduct a minimum of one public hearing to provide instruction to the consultant for the development of a preliminary districting plan or plans. So it's up to your discretion if you feel like you need another meeting to sort of solicit information or to give feedback. I think that's within your discretion. I think the only limiting principle is trying to meet that 1 year deadline in state law, and or the other limit that I think Mr. Sharp pointed out earlier.
Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Comments from the commissioners? Questions? Brittany?
Sorry, Madam Chair, thank you. I just had a clarifying question. We have seen in other jurisdictions that the committee and the public sort of work together. The public comes in and makes comments, but then the committee can also sort of provide feedback and make comments at the same meeting. Is that something that seems allowable under the ordinance? And is that something the committee would consider to not have quite so many meetings?
I would guess, unless Christine jumps in, I would guess that's the discretion of this committee to determine our format. If we want to have comments by the commissioners at the same time we're presenting, Brian and his group has presented it to the community. We certainly can do, I think, either way. My question to Brian is it best for a commission to have one meeting, two meetings, and understand what you're presenting and then go with that clear package that we all understand to the community and let the community react to us and provide their comments and us be silent and just listen? What do you see as most successful in your experience?
I think, as Brittany said, I think both can happen concurrently. At the next meeting, we could get more direction from you, but we could show concepts and get direction about those concepts, and we can refine them. And then once those other public meetings begin, they're seeing at least a version where we presented some concepts to you. You told us what you liked and didn't like and what we should tweak, and take that show on the road. Then in all the other meetings, you would have an opportunity to comment on the next iterations. The public would have an opportunity to comment on the next iterations. And if you think that the public's comments were very valid and you say to us, yeah, we like that idea, why don't you drop a plan based on that member of the public, or a particular committee member wants to tweak a plan, we would continue that iterative process. So the next meeting we can show plans, get your feedback, what you like and don't, tweak those plans, and take those plans to the other public meetings. I mean, even in that very next meeting, it's conceivable that you can allow the public to speak even at the very next meeting, if you wanted to.
If I may, and maybe Mr. Fernandez can help us with this, at that next meeting, if that's the one that is envisioned for the instruction to the consultant for the development of a preliminary districting plan or plans, that is listed as a public hearing. So I think we're obligated to hear from the public at that meeting as well. My suggestion would be 2 weeks from today, we have that meeting, April 21st. And maybe then, between then and coming up with a final plan or plans to present at public meetings, we have one more meeting that's not considered a public hearing in between, where we can engage in our own discussion and then give research and polling further guidance towards plans that might then be the 4 public meeting plans or go into that process.
So Beryl, you're saying April 21st, we meet as a group Thursday at 3, and then also on April 28th, we meet as a commission?
Not necessarily the 28th, maybe 2 weeks later.
Oh, I'm sorry, 2 weeks. Got it. Got it.
Right.
That would be May 5th?
Yeah, that's what my calendar shows.
Okay. Good, we have the same calendar. Is that comments or reactions from committee members, commission members, sorry. Good suggestion, Beryl.
And that
Okay.
that first meeting, the April 21st meeting.
21st.
I'm sorry, 21st, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one that would be intended to comply with F2 of city code. That would be the hearing. And I think it's a good idea for research and polling to come to us with their suggestions that we can then comment on and the public can comment on as a first round effort.
Good. How does that sound, everyone? Sounds good to me. What does everyone think? I see some heads nodding.
Sounds good.
Christine, did you have something to
I was
add?
just going to note that that sounds good, and we can add a public hearing or a public comment to the agenda for that meeting so that you can have your discussion, and then similar to this, the agenda that we utilized for today, after matters from the chair or before, we could designate a time for public comment or as a public hearing, and then we'll get that also noted and sent out.
That would be for the May 5th meeting?
Yes.
Public comment for May.
Although, oh shoot, I just lost my bookmark. Marcos, I just want to confirm though that under F2, the commission shall conduct a minimum of one public hearing to provide instruction to the consultant. So at the April 21st meeting, my thought would be that we would have the item on the agenda for public comment after the presentations from research and polling, and after the commission has had an opportunity to discuss, they could then receive public feedback at that time for participation. Is that how, that's how I read, but I'm not good. Yes.
I think that that's entirely within your discretion. I don't think that that makes sense to me, though, from a common sense point of view. Thank you.
I just want to make let me see. Gary, you have your hand up.
So are we arguing here that 421 is going to include public comment, and then the section F3, where you have the minimum of 4 public hearings, is also going to be a public comment, whether it be oral or written?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm trying to understand that. It sounds like that's what I just heard explained. I'm just wondering if it's too soon on April 21st, when we are getting when we're understanding and getting presented by Mr. Sanderoff and this group information, and we're reacting to it. I'm just wondering if that's not too soon to get public comment, and we should wait until the May 5th meeting to have public comment and use the 21st meeting for the presentation, the understanding, the reaction, and then direction to Mr. Sanderoff and his people to go back and do whatever. That's my
That's my feeling, because I think that the commission will have a lot of questions and comments about line drawing and about the component parts, the 5 specific component parts of redistricting that have to be considered in the drawings. And that may be a little bit too confusing for public, adding public comment on that as well. So I think we should get the first set of drawings done and then look at bringing the public in.
Good comment, Gary. Other comments? Brian?
In theory, that sounds great. Our experience is that the more you allow the public to comment, the less subject to criticism you will be.
Okay.
And so that's something to consider. Some communities limit public comment to that early meeting to 2 minutes or 3 minutes to give people an opportunity. Probably the ball hadn't been rolling that much, and there'd probably be very few people at that first meeting anyway. And so you just need to consider the fact that whether you want to hold yourself to possible public criticism. The funny thing about those meetings are, if you don't give the public an opportunity to comment, they raise hell. But if you give them the opportunity, very few people show up at those early meetings. Right. And so that's your call. Just telling you based on past experience.
Well, sorry, I do just want to note that the code actually says public hearing to provide instruction to the consultant. So I feel like public hearing or public comment could be on the agenda, but that was kind of my recommendation for the structure of the agenda. It would be very similar to if we just had this meeting and the next item on the agenda would be public comment. So I do want to know that the agenda can absolutely help guide the structure of the meeting. And then for an example, this meeting, the next item on the agenda after discussion from the committee could be comment from the public, but section F2 does note one public hearing to provide instruction to the consultant for the development of a preliminary districting plan or plans. So Marcos, if that is incorrect, or if and the other thing I just want to note is then for item 3, F3, those could be structured differently. So again, with the public hearing, those could be the meetings in which the entire presentation or the agenda immediately went to presentation of plans and feedback. So just in the structure of meetings, those can be done very differently, but based on the code, I don't know that we could not allow public comment at the next meeting. Marcos, if.
I have Nicholas's hand raised and Gary. Nicholas?
Excuse me. Yes, so I'm wondering, wouldn't it be a good idea for us to understand the plan first before we hold a public meeting? Because if questions are being fielded to us, we want to be able to answer some of those questions, provide feedback or guidance. So I feel like us as a group, we need to understand the entire process, if you will, before we move forward and bring it to the public for questions and feedback.
Good question. Who wants to field that? Christine, maybe, or Mr. Martinez?
So I guess I would agree with what Christine has said about using the agenda to sort of give some structure to how and set the expectations for the public. I understand what everyone is saying about wanting to have a little bit more grasp on what the potential plans are before they solicit reactions from the public. I think just by way of background, it is very typical for our city council and committee meetings to have a public comment portion on an agenda. And this just sometimes, as Mr. Sandera pointed out, gives the public an opportunity to just say something like, thank you for doing this, or you really need to pay attention to X, Y, or Z. And it probably won't be at a level of any kind of specificity, especially in the beginning of these meetings, until you're really presenting the plans, when you might be hearing which plan there's a preference for when you're debating between potential plans. So I don't think there's great harm, and I think there's probably more, it's probably a less controversial move to just allow a public comment late in the agenda at the next meeting, where you're still, recognizing that everyone is still soliciting information and trying to understand what the plans are and what the possibilities are. And then, 3 under the code F3 that everyone is talking about, that is much more specific. It talks about receiving oral and written comments. I think we're going to want to have more time on the agenda to allow the public to speak on the plans as they're developed. So my recommendation would be to allow a public comment late in the agenda at the next meeting. And as both Christine and Mr. Sanderoff have noted, and then looking more towards those particularized meetings where you're looking at the plans, probably expecting more developed or robust public comment at those meetings. And that's just my 2 cents. I think it's absolutely necessary for the 4 public hearings set aside. I would recommend you have it for the next meeting. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Marcus. Gary?
On the way I'm reading it, and having been on like charter commissions, F2 allows us to have that public, but the predominant voices there are going to be the commission members. Whereas F3, the predominant voices are the public, and we sort of step back a little bit, and the public voice is really aimed at the consultant or giving to the consultant to actually be the respondent. So in my view, F2 does not preclude a public voice. It's just that public voice is minimized to the commission voice. So I think in this case, I'm agreeing with with the Attorney Martinez here and how I read F2 and F3.
Thank you. Burl, you've got your hand
Yeah,
up.
and I agree with Mr. Martinez and Christine as well. Again, back to my thought, yes, comply with code in that first section, have the meeting on April 21st, and have the public be able to participate. And I think that gives research and polling folks questions. We don't have to be the experts at that meeting. We as the commissioners don't have to be the experts. The experts will be at the meeting as well, and they can field any questions. And that's why I further suggested the meeting 2 weeks later, before the public meetings get fully underway, where we can maybe get the first round of information from research and polling and have our own meeting that does not necessarily have public comment at that May 8th meeting. And then go into the four public meetings with full-blown public participation, if that could make sense to research and polling, to Brian and his crew.
Any other comments? Mr. Sanderoff, how does that sound?
I think, well, my general feeling is, based on too much of this over the years, is to give the public an opportunity to comment in every meeting. And oftentimes in the early meetings, you get 1 or 2 or 3 people, but at least they had the opportunity. I agree with what I heard about the first meeting. The onus is more on the board, the commission members, to be asking the questions, and the public can have their say if they have something to say. And then the subsequent meetings could be more in the other direction, with the public having the priority. But again, my experience has been one agenda item always being public comment, just so that you avoid any criticism regarding transparency.
Any other comments from commissioners? I don't see any hands. So I've always been told, listen to your attorneys and listen to the experts, because they've been there and they've done it and they know what they're doing. And as a former board member, we always had public comment at the end of our meetings, and it's a good transparency move. I think it's a best practice. And in our first 2 meetings, having it, as Christine suggests, just structured on the agenda at the end as a public comment, we can set a time limit, and we could simply accept comments without any thought of responding. It could be just an opportunity to allow individuals to speak and respond and react to what we presented, and just thank them for their presentation or whatever they're sharing with us. But we don't have to respond to them. So that would give the public an opportunity to sit in on all our meetings and have a comment at the end, at least the first 2 without us responding. And then as we get into the public hearings, of course, there's probably going to be some dialogue back and forth between our experts and the public. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
I'm seeing some heads nod. Does that work, Christine, Brian? Okay. All right. So we've got a format for we've got 2 more meetings set up. We've got a format set up for them. What else do we need to do? Because we want to finish before 5, right? We never talked about that, but we don't want our meetings to go past 5. Is that correct? Okay, what else, Christine? Anything else?
No, ma'am. At that point on the agenda, at this point, we have matters from the committee. I think that's probably what we were just wrapping up. If there's any matters from the chair, as you've noted, we've scheduled the next 2 meetings. And so if you don't have any other items, Madam Chair, then we could adjourn.
The only question I have, and I'll also defer to my vice chair, do the vice chair and I need to meet with you, Christine or Brian, or have any conversation about format or any in preparation for the next meetings or the scheduling?
Madam Chair, we do normally meet with our chairs to just verify the agenda. and any presentations. So we're happy to schedule that follow-up meeting with you.
Okay, great. Any other comments from commissioners? Well, I'm excited. I think we have our work cut out for us. What do you think? And we're going to have to really sharpen our pencils and pens and look at those numbers. And when will we be getting the information that Brian presented to us today? Just email that to us in the next day or two.
We can present the slideshow as is, I think, Michael, right? And that could even be posted on the website conceivably, and then to all the commission members.
Right, yeah, we can email that to city staff, and then that can be disseminated as needed.
Perfect. And then just
Yeah.
as a reminder, if anybody would like to go back and look at it, they can go to the city YouTube page, and our meeting is posted there. So you can watch this meeting again and the presentation.
Right, and the presentation does have a couple tables at the end that we didn't go over, so it would be nice for all of you to pick up the electronic version that that staff will send you as well, an attachment maybe, or look at it online.
Absolutely. We can do both. So Michael, if you'll send that to our office, we'll get it distributed to commission members, and then we can also post it online. And then we will work with the committee once the agenda is available in advance of the next meeting. Probably our assistant city clerk will send it out because she's amazing at keeping us on track. And then if the presentations are available at that time, we'll include them as packet material in advance of the meeting for your review.
And also the minutes of the meeting will be included in all of that?
Yes.
Okay.
And we utilize PrimeGov as a central hub. You all should have received invites for logins for PrimeGov. It's also available to the public, but it's where our office will upload minutes, agenda items, and so forth.
Okay. Final comments, commissioners?
I'd just like to
at the beginning, excuse me.
go right ahead.
Typically at the beginning of the next meeting, we'll also recap the ABCs that we just did, only a shorter version because there'll be new members of the public, and people need to understand the constraints of redistricting, that the populations have to be equal and they can't just have a district that is comprised of just their one neighborhood, and people need to be reminded of the rules.
Good. I appreciate that. I think we need that all along the process. Thank you, Burl.
I just want to thank Research and Polling for being here. I know their background and appreciate that we're in good hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, are we done? If we are, do I have a motion for adjournment and a second?
You get to just adjourn.
Oh, we don't need motions? Okay, boy, I feel so powerful all of a sudden. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.